I'm going to talk about something very serious. I usually try to keep things somewhat light, even when we're talking about mental health issues and things of that nature. But today I want to make a statement about gun violence. And yeah, I'm going to get emotional. Monday, we had another deadly school shooting in Nashville. This time, 3 9-year-olds died. 3 9-year-olds. 9! And I thought that our politicians would come to a solution after Columbine. That was the start of all of this. I remember that vividly. But here we are. And each time another school shooting happens, and each time more families and communities grieve the loss of their children, we are stuck asking again, why? Why aren't our politicians doing something? Why aren't they doing anything? And people say, oh, don't bring politics into this. Well, I'm going to bring politics into this because there is one party that consistently seems perfectly okay to watch our children die, and that's the Republican Party. The GOP, their policy is to do nothing or to make guns more accessible. And before you say to yourself, guns don't kill people, you know what? It's a whole lot harder for people to kill other people if they've got a rock or a knife. It gives you a chance. And yeah, we are a nation that has the right to bear arms in our Constitution. And when those laws were written, those arms were muskets. You know, it took a long time to load a musket, to put the little ball in there and the powder and everything. That's not what we have now. What we have now are weapons on the street that were designed for war. They were designed for war. They were designed to amass the largest number of casualties in an armed conflict. They weren't designed for protection. They weren't designed for hunting. That's not what they're for. It's ludicrous. This country had laws on the books that said, no, AR-15s, assault rifles, weapons of war were not okay to be purchased by an 18-year-old. Or in some states, they're saying younger, because it's considered a long rifle? A long rifle? Now, I understand the need to protect livestock. I grew up on a ranch. I grew up with a pasture full of sheep. I grew up with a stepfather who taught me, when I think I was 10, how to fire a .22 in case wild dogs or a mountain lion or something like that got in and started attacking the flock. He showed me how to shoot a .22 so that I could protect our livestock from attack. So I understand that concept. But what we have now is a culture of guns and violence that it's not about protecting. It's, let's face it, it's about a lot of white men who use these high-power weapons. Like instead of a penis, now they have a gun. It's totally unacceptable. It's totally ludicrous. And you can't say that guns make us safer. Because we have the most guns of any nation in the world. And you know what we have? We have the most people dying of gun violence every single year. The most children being gunned down every single year. And here we are in this gridlock of politics where the Democrats are trying to pass sane gun legislation, and we have Republicans saying, no, we won't let you. And in state houses, we have the GOP and Republicans saying, no, we want to make it easier to own guns. We want to make it easier to have a concealed weapon. Now, rather than just sit here and gripe about this because we go round and round and every time one of these school shootings happens, every time, those of us who care about the children, we bawl and we cry in front of the TV watching these images, knowing that it's going to happen again and hoping that it won't be our child or our grandchild or our neighbor's kid. I have a suggestion on what we can do about it. And it doesn't involve specifics about laws and regulations. And honestly, I don't know enough about the law to know for sure if it's possible or constitutional. But our president has certain powers to write executive orders. And no, he can't write an executive order changing the laws and regulations about how guns are registered, who can have them, what kind of weapons. But maybe, President Biden, maybe you can write an executive order that states that any time there is a mass shooting in the district, that the mayor, the local government officials, the Congress people of that district must tour the scene before the blood is mopped up, before the bodies of those children are carted away. As soon as the crime scene investigators have gone through and done what they need to do, I want our politicians to be forced to walk those halls. I want them to be forced to see the blood-smeared walls, the brains that are spattered across the floor. I want them to see and experience with their own eyes what has been done to our children. I want them to have to go to the hospitals and see the survivors. I want them to have to go to the morgue and see those tiny little bodies torn apart. Because they clearly don't understand. They don't understand. Why do I understand? Because I'm empathetic, because I get it. Apparently our politicians have no empathy anymore. When I was a child, a wild dog got into our field and started chasing our sheep, tearing them up. That happens sometimes. Domestic dogs, they get a taste for blood. So my stepfather, to protect the herd, went out there with his shotgun. And I witnessed this. It happened to be a German Shepherd. And he shot the dog, turned part of that dog, size of a softball, into hamburger meat. That dog, running and chasing and panting, dropped like that. Guts torn apart. I watched that at night. That kind of thing is happening to our children in their school where they are supposed to be safe and learning. They are supposed to be safe and learning. And if you can't imagine what kind of violence we're talking about, we're not talking about small bullet holes. We're not talking about, sanitized, when you're watching something like Law and Order or whatever, dramatized violence. No, that's not what this is. Surgeons have talked to Congress about what they face when the children do survive and they're brought in for surgery and they're ripped apart. They're ripped apart. How can we allow this to happen to our children? And you know what it taught me at 9? That I didn't want to be the one to pull the trigger. And when a couple years later, some dogs got into our sheep pasture and started chasing our sheep, I called to them and I coaxed them and I lured them into the barn and locked them in. And then I looked at their tags and I found the number of their owners. And I called them to come get their pets because they hadn't done any damage yet. And I didn't want to be part of that violence. Perhaps the only way we can get our politicians to do something to protect our children is to make them experience this violence firsthand, to make them see exactly the damage, to make them sit at the hospital beds of the children who survive. Because even the survivors, not only are they emotionally traumatized, they're permanently damaged. There is a young man from Parkland shooting who will have a colostomy bag for the rest of his life. He wasn't even an adult when he got sentenced to lifelong having to deal with a colostomy bag. Don't fool yourself. Don't let anybody tell you this is the greatest country in the world. Because this gun violence, it has solutions. It has solutions. Other nations have experienced horrific mass shootings, just like we have. But when that happened in Australia, they said never again. When that happens here, we have to ask, how long until it happens again? I urge the president to make an executive order that the politicians who do nothing be forced to bear witness to what's being done to our children. That's all I got to say. I don't know how else to make these cold-hearted people understand